Hi, my name is Mark Biernat, and I'm an economist. In this video, I want to talk about the new Russia, the Russian economic direction that it's going to take for the next X amount of years. It's clearly laid out in a book by Stanford University in 2001 called The New Russia. The reason it's laid out in that book is Andrzej Belousov, I say it with a Polish accent, so I don't know if it's the correct pronunciation, but Andrzej Belousov is the new defense minister who is an economist. He wrote an academic journal article in 2001. It's in a compendium book, and it's called The New Russia. A little bit about his background. He graduated from Moscow State in 81. His father was a hardcore Soviet economist, and the acorn doesn't fall too far from the tree. And his name, I'm trying to find what his last name is meaning in Russian, but maybe it means white. So maybe the guy's name is Andy White, graduated from the State College in 81. It sounds pretty benign, but it isn't. His plan laid out in academic journals and literature, if you search Google Scholar, it's very simple and clear. Heavy centralization. He models it. He wants to model it specifically after the Chinese economy. And on page 210 in that, he says that the high rates of capital accumulation and success in the Chinese economy was due because of the control and centralization, in effect, the Sovietization of the economy, the communization, the Sovietization, central control and central planning. He says the failure of Russia in the 90s was the liberalization and the turn to capitalism. So he wrote this on paper in black and white for all the world to see in academic articles. If you translate some academic articles from Russian, you can see it further. Everything he writes in academia is about centralization and control. Why is this important? Because it's a new Russia. In fact, it's ironic the book is entitled The New Russia. The Russia that is going 100% full Monty, all out towards Soviet Union, maybe 3.0 now. He is the number 2 man in Russia, and he's an economic minister. Now, there's no direct evidence, but there's implicit evidence that he's modeling it quasi after Albert Speer in Germany in the 1940s. And Speer based his economy on 1, centralization, 2, move key industries underground, beneath the ground, 3, create these rapid response units to repair damage to the infrastructure, and 4, he used forced labor. Forced labor obviously is a very wrong thing, but in Russia, they don't see it that way, and maybe they'll, it's really the Iron Curtain going back up, so you're not going to see what's going to be happening behind the scenes. What is wrong with this model? First, let's talk about what happened in Germany in the 1940s. In the 1940s, I almost think that some people wrongly in history books almost have this romanticism about that. Albert Speer, who created efficiency and gains in the economy. Let's talk about that. There was an episode in the original Star Trek called The Powders of Forth, where John Gill, a professor, tried to emulate, just like this new Andy White of Andrzej Belousov is trying to emulate Speer in the 1940s. The result, John Gill, a professor, claims it's the most efficient economy the world has ever seen. Mr. Spock replies, it can't be done without sadism, okay? And, I would very much question it wasn't the most efficient economy because there were massive shortages in Germany in the 1940s, misallocation of resources, mistakes, and ultimately they lost and collapsed, right? Because there's something called dead weight loss. When you impose a top-down approach on the economy, such as, let's say, every flat in Moscow should be 50-meter flat should be, $100. That creates a tremendous misallocation of resources, dead weight loss. You have non-price rationing. You have to smile at your landlord to get an apartment if you're even lucky to get an apartment. It just will not work. So if you base an entire economy on that, it accelerates the decline. So this new Andrzej Belousov, he's going to accelerate the decline of Russia. I know it gives the despots warm fuzzies when they feel like they have everything under control. But in the words of Princess Leia, the more you tighten your grip, the more star systems slip out of your grasp. So the key idea here is Russia is going to a direction of accelerated centralization and Soviet planning. His father was a hardcore socialist economist. He was a hardcore socialist economist, and he even states his ideas about Russia and China and his modeling after the Chinese economy in his academic research. If you're doing economic research, you put it on paper, you sign your name to it, and you're proud of it, like he does in his book. Or it's not his book, it's Stanford University's book of a compendia, which contains an element of his writings that you can see in translation. But if you can read Russian, then you can read the untranslated work. He clearly states he is going in that direction. Soviet Union 3.0 on new, high-tech Sovietization. So we've got a despot with Sovietization. He believes any liberalization in the 1990s was an utmost failure. He also encased in his ideas, and he explains it, he calls it self-reliance, but he really believes in this country of isolation, close the borders and create a Russia that is totally self-dependent without need for import. There's a big problem with that, is because the economy is so complex today that you can't, maybe you could base an agrarian economy, maybe an industrial economy or a pre-industrial economy on that, but every component that goes into an electronic device or any sophisticated modern piece of equipment, machine tool, cutting and die, anyway, logistics, transportation, it has to be interrelated to a complex system of economics, global system, mind you, that is connected to entrepreneurial incentive and effort. If you take away entrepreneurial incentive and effort and go towards centralization, it's a bad situation. And let me give you an example. I worked at Deutsche Bank for a while. I shouldn't say that. Deutsche Bank is known as the Russian bank, but whatever, even though it's German. They were all about this. They had these guys flexing and standing over you about centralization, control, time tracking. And, people were fleeing that like rats from a sinking ship. Nobody likes to be controlled. Nobody wants to be part of that forced labor. And Russians, they're smart people. They're going to just escape. And it's a win-win for Ukraine. We want this centralization to bring back the 90s, the collapse of Russia, and bring back a reformatting of Russia. This time, we're going to make sure that is done properly in terms of the Russian people internally reformatting it in a democratic, transparent place to make the world a better place. So if Andrei Belorusov writes in his academic journals that he's modeling it after the Chinese economy of old, where it's heavy centralization, state control, government control. He's a stabilizer. He likes to use these warm, fuzzy words like stabilization, implementation of technology. These are just coded words for Soviet Union. And Soviet Union was an asshole. And you know what I'm talking about. It was the worst place on earth. And the echo of that and the shadows of that exist 50 years later. So that's a win for Ukraine, that Shoigu has been replaced by Belorusov. And rarely do I talk about news, but this is economic news. I don't want to talk about news because it's just information. This is economic news that tells you the projection of and the trajectory of Russia economically. It's going to massive centralization, forced labor, people, and it's going to result in deadweight loss, unhappiness, decreased morale, all the things that Germany had in the 1940s that ultimately resulted, and it was ineffective even, resulted in the fall, decline, and collapse. So that's going to echo it. That is my critique. If you have any comments or you want to debate me or counter my arguments, but first, look up his academic journals and writings. My name is Mark Biernat. Have a great day. Thank you very much.